Welcome everybody to the AMAC Foundation 2020 seminar series. I'm Jerry Hafer with the AMAC Foundation. I have with me Eileen Cook, my right arm at AMAC, and I have Brittany Berger with VITAS. I'll say a little bit more about her in a moment and VITAS. But I'd just like to kick off our program here with a little bit of a discussion of who AMAC is. Many of you watching this video may not be fully aware of who AMAC is. AMAC is the Association of Mature American Citizens, and the AMAC Foundation is a nonprofit subsidiary of AMAC. And AMAC, as I said, the Association of Mature American Citizens is in essence the conservative voice for Americans 50 years of age and older. It's an organization that represents seniors in Washington, making sure that senior issues are being effectively addressed in Washington. There's concerns that the needs and the interests of seniors aren't properly addressed in the political arena, and that's what AMAC's mission is. AMAC is growing rapidly. We are at 2.2, actually roughly 2.3 million members now as of this week. And we've been growing dramatically in the past couple of months. AMAC is relatively new, was formed in 2007 by a gentleman by the name of Dan Weber, the late Dan Weber, who was apparently got sort of disgruntled with the way seniors are not adequately represented. So he formed the Association of Mature American Citizens. And in the 13 years that it's been an organization, it has grown steadily and lately has begun to grow quite rapidly. And again, the mission is to support seniors in Washington. The AMAC Foundation, as I mentioned, is the nonprofit arm of AMAC, and we have a simple mission at the foundation: supporting and educating America's seniors. The full mission, though, very eloquently says to help protect and ensure the financial security, health, and social lives of current and future mature Americans, and to help Americans navigate the bewildering array of decisions they need to make. And that's where we basically spend most of our time, on that latter point. Seniors that are aging into programs like Medicare and Social Security have an incredible number of decisions they have to make, and that's our mission, to try to help them navigate those decisions. How do we do this? Basically, we produce publications on matters that are affecting seniors. We have some books that we've produced, things like Who's Who in Social Security. We just produced a major book about Social Security questions and answers. We produce a blog entry once a week on, again, issues affecting seniors. And we also operate two dedicated websites. One is focused on Social Security, the other focused on Medicare. And I would invite you to take a look at those websites. They're packed with information, and the URLs are socialsecurity.report.org and medicarereport.org. And there's a wealth of information available on them. Both of those websites channel breaking news about those two programs. So we use those to keep people aware of what's going on nationwide, really, but mostly in Washington in terms of legislation affecting Social Security and Medicare. So it's a constant update of what's happening. We also have a lot of archival information on those sites. For example, on the Social Security side, we have all of the recent Social Security trustees reports and a lot of fact sheets about Social Security. So it's kind of a place to go for anybody that wants to get updated on what's happening in Social Security and Medicare. They're very active websites. We also operate an accredited Social Security advisory program, and this is what we call our flagship program. We have 6 accredited advisors that have been trained and accredited to answer questions from the public about Social Security. Social Security is a complex area. There are thousands and thousands of rules and regulations and hundreds of thousands of pages of documentation that support those regulations. And somebody aging into Social Security needs to understand the correct way to make their decisions, because if they make decisions incorrectly, they are typically irrevocable and can affect them for the rest of their lives. So we provide a value service to seniors, to people aging into those programs. We handle between 400 and 500 inquiries every month, and it's something that a lot of people have relied on and continue to rely on to get valid and credible guidance about Social Security and Medicare. So that's basically our flagship program, and again, that's very active as well. And public seminars on topics that are vital to seniors. We operate a seminar program that up until the COVID-19 situation earlier this year, we presented 2 to 3 seminars on average every month with an average of 35 attendees, but they were face-to-face seminars for seniors. We live streamed many of those across the AMAC network across the country. So we had a lot of people involved electronically with those seminars, but we stopped that in March again because of the pandemic, and we've resorted to Zoom webinars as an alternative, and we're hoping to get back into the live seminar series. Well, I don't know when. I don't think anybody knows when at this point, but we're hoping early next year perhaps we'll get back into doing that, because seniors seem to like that better. They seem to like the contact, the face-to-face contact. So we're hoping to resume that early next year. But we cover topics like preventing financial fraud, certainly Social Security and Medicare basics. On the Medicare side, for example, we just did a seminar titled New to Medicare, What You Need to Know, for people that are aging into that program. We cover seminars on technical issues, issues like, oddly enough, one of the most popular subjects that we've done a seminar on is how to get rid of your cable company. It's one that was suggested to us by an attendee at another conference that basically said, I wish you could tell me how to get rid of my cable company. So we've done a couple of seminars on cutting the cord, we call it. And basically what it focuses on is entertainment options for people, that just want to get rid of you can't get rid of your cable completely, but you can change your entertainment options. And that's what people want to know about. They have been the most well-attended sessions we've done. We get anywhere from 80 to 100 people every time we do it. So it's an area of intense interest. But anyway, those are the kind of topics that we present to people. And as I said, up until March of this year, we presented 2 to 3 every month, and we'd like to continue that and hope to start that again early next year. Okay, that's a quick overview of AMAC and the AMAC Foundation. VITAS is with us today. Brittany Berger is our presenter today. And VITAS Healthcare is the nation's largest single source provider of end-of-life care. We've had a relationship with VITAS for a number of years now, and it's a great relationship that we have with them. They've presented a number of seminars for us, for our audiences, and they just do an incredible job. And we certainly appreciate having them with us. VITAS has a 40-plus year record of community service. They have been around for a while. And as I said momentarily, they are the largest single service provider of end-of-life care. VITAS has 12,000 healthcare professionals on their staff, and they work through a lot of volunteers, 4,800 trained volunteers that perform community service as part of their programs. Their network covers a big area, 14 states and the District of Columbia. So it's a vibrant organization, and one that we are really pleased to have the relationship with them that we do. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Brittany's discussion on understanding advanced directives. Advanced directives is something that a lot of people don't really understand and don't really think about until they get to the point where they need to think about it. And a lot of people aren't clear really on, for example, how living wills work when you're in an emergency situation, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and how the medical profession looks at it. So we wanted to do a seminar on this topic, again, just to acquaint people with the basics of what they are and how they work. And so we went to the specialist, VITAS, and are fortunate to have today Brittany Berger, who is admissions manager, and she's also an RN. for Vitas Healthcare, and has a wealth of knowledge in this particular topic. And we really appreciate her being with us.
Thank you, Jerry. As Jerry said, my name is Brittany. I am a registered nurse here in the state of Florida, a lifelong resident here in Lake County. I am honored and privileged to be here to speak with you guys about this topic today. It's something that is very, very near and dear to my heart. As Jerry said, this is something that is very underutilized. We don't have many people promoting things like this in the community because it is a scary subject. It's a sensitive subject. And so my goal for you guys today is really to just bring some light to the different verbiage that's used when we talk about advanced directives. And if there's any other questions or things, maybe able to guide you guys in the direction of where to get that information from your local physician or community resources like this service here. So are you guys are they getting an actual CE for this class today, Jerry? You're muted, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I had muted myself, I'm sorry. No,
sorry.
This is just for general information, no CEs.
Okay, so I don't need to go through this. Okay. So the goal of today's presentation, again, is to educate you all here in the community on what advanced directives are and how advanced care planning can support not only you, but your family members as well. So the NHPCO, so the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, uses a great summary of exactly what this is, and it says, advanced care planning is making decisions about the health care you would want to receive if you were facing a medical crisis. These are your decisions to make, regardless of what you choose for your care, and the decisions are based on what your personal values, preferences, and the discussions you've had with your loved ones. We're going to elaborate on that much deeper. Some basic key points here. Many people near the end of life are not physically or cognitively able to make their own decisions. So that's a really scary thought, right? So most of the people who are reaching that point in their lives are not able to make those own decisions for themselves on what happens next. Of people who indicate their end-of-life care preferences, most choose for their care to be focused on alleviating pain and suffering. So you'll hear me use symptom management a lot throughout this presentation, and that's really what we're talking about. What is causing them suffering, and how can we make that better? How can they make their own choices for that? Frequent ongoing clinical conversations about end of life, and what are your goals, the preferences that are necessary to avoid unwanted treatment. We'll elaborate much deeper. Clinicians bear the responsibility. Clinicians meaning nurses, doctors, hospital staff, your primary care doctor. We bear the responsibility to help you as the patient explore what are your options, and how can we help you formulate a plan of care based on risk versus benefit, and what your values as the patient are going to be moving forward for you. The ACP basics, these really support patients of any age and at any state in their current health. So whether this is a 21-year-old patient who wants to know what their future may hold and be educated so when those times come they can make those decisions, or the 90-year-old who really doesn't have a lot of family left and she wants the people who are going to be caring for her to know what that looks like. Advanced directives are important at any stage in life. Discussions about goals and timing are going to vary based on, again, whether that's a 21-year-old or a 90-year-old. Do these patients have chronic illnesses, or were they just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer that they never really knew about? So we deal with educating on patients of any type of current status. So this requires communication between you as the patient, your family, your doctors, being able to cultivate that conversation with what is driving that. So the primary objective, again, is ensuring that the patients receive the care that is aligned with their own goals and values. Being open and having these honest conversations with your care team, your family, your spouse, your children, this is the key to setting all of us up to have a successful outcome in these conversations. So studies show that conversation improve multiple different things. So fewer hospital admissions, fewer patients being admitted to critical care, intensive care units at end of life. When I think about that, you know, if you've had the conversation and you say, I don't want to be at the hospital when I pass away. I don't want to pass away on a ventilator in an ICU. These outcomes do improve enrollment to hospice and palliative services in the community prior to getting to those critical moments. You have a higher likelihood of a person dying in the setting of their choice. So for those of you that have had that conversation and you say, I just want to die at home in my own bed with my dog at my side, and I don't want to be in a hospital or one of those sterile environments. And you do have an increased satisfaction with, you know, the outcomes of making sure that our families know what we want. Few individuals have had the discussion with their physician. So again, this is really alarming when you talk about a mature population who has probably had the same doctor for 30 years. It's hard for me as a nurse to think that, you know, you've been my patient for 30 years and I've never asked you what that looks like. What does end of life look like for you? Where do you want to be? How do you want this to look? What are the things you want to focus on? These statistics show that only 11% report that they've had a conversation with their doctor, 11%. Only 22% of those ages 65 and older have had a conversation with their healthcare provider. Most healthcare professionals want to talk to patients about end-of-life care, but they're uncomfortable, they're not prepared, and they don't engage in the conversation. So when we talk about that, when I think about myself as an RN, and I've worked in the emergency department, I've worked in ICU, I take this to heart because I've been that nurse before that's had to come up to a family of a 90-year-old woman who has dementia and can't care for herself and say, what do you guys want us to do next? And they look at each other and they're terrified and they say, well, we've never had that conversation with mom. And now they're scared, they're in an unfamiliar environment, and they're being faced with really big, scary decisions that now under pressure because we're in an emergency. Now is the time. So I empower, you know, my peers to have that uncomfortable conversation and get this knowledge so that we are comfortable engaging in the conversations with our patients. So here's a couple little statistics. So large shares would be comfortable talking about end of life. So this little study that they did says, how comfortable would you be talking about your own end-of-life wishes with each of the following? So 86% people said they're totally okay talking to their spouse about it. You know, when you've been married for 30, 40, 50 years, as so many of you are blessed to have been, that's a lot. You know, you have that conversation with your partner. How comfortable would you be talking to your doctor about your end-of-life decisions? 66% of the population surveyed said that they would be comfortable. Another 26% says, I'm not really sure. I would be, you know, a little uneasy having that conversation, and it's probably out of fear. 60% of the population said they're comfortable talking to their children about it. I think one of the biggest barriers when I talk to patients and say, have you talked to your kids about this? They're worried about being a burden to their family. They're worried about stressing their kids out having this conversation. But the children want to talk about it. In the next study, you see, how comfortable are you talking to your parents about this? And 58% said they're very comfortable. Another 23% said somewhat comfortable. So those numbers to me say, you know, they want to have this conversation. Your kids want to talk to you about this. And then the last piece is your priest, a minister, your religious, you know, spiritual supervisor, whatever that looks like. 53% said they're very comfortable. 22% said somewhat comfortable. To me, there's obviously so many factors that come into play when you talk about the religious aspect of the end of life. But most of the time, your spiritual leaders want to have this conversation with you and can sometimes maybe guide you through the barriers or things you see as barriers for helping to guide you there. End of life discussions align with care, the patient's wishes and values. So when you talk about things like the psychological subscale adjusted to, I don't want to go into that. So when you see these values and you talk about patients who are approaching end of life, the acceptance, preference, and planning. Patients are, most of the patients are against dying in ICU. Most of these patients in their mature ages can accept that an illness that they're battling is terminal. But not everyone has completed a DNR, and we'll talk about more about what that DNR is in very basic terms. And then how many patients have completed a living will, a durable power of attorney, or a healthcare proxy. And we'll break each one of those titles down further. End of life discussions. They're 2 times as likely to accept an advanced diagnosis. They're 2 times as likely to be opposed to dying in an ICU, like we just said, and they're 3 times more likely to complete a DNR. So that to me says if we are brave enough as healthcare professionals to have this conversation with you, that you are that much more likely to have a clear understanding, to tell us what you would and would not want. You're going to start getting things in place and setting up your advanced directives and having, you know, a plan. Us empowering you with this information gives you the control. It gives you the right to say, I want to do this. It doesn't mean you're giving up. It doesn't mean to lose hope. It just means that you're getting your ducks in a row and you're in control of this situation. And Jerry, Eileen, please feel free to stop me if you guys have any questions or want me to elaborate on anything at any point. So when we talk about the history of advanced directives, this was a consumer rights movement back in the 1960s and 70s when the Supreme Court said that patients have a constitutional right to refuse life-sustaining treatment. You have the right to refuse for things to be done. Over time, the court has decided that the withdrawal of care and the refusal for extended these rights for patients who have without capacity to be able to utilize people like a healthcare surrogate or a healthcare advocate to help you through those decisions when you can't make those decisions on your own. In 1990, it seems like a really long time ago, Congress passed the Patient Self-Determination Act. And what this did is it said they're implementing programs that provide all adult patients at the time of admission or enrollment with information about what their rights are regarding healthcare decision making. As part of this act, there were things discussed like patients have the right to participate in and direct their own healthcare decisions. You have the right to say, I know I have cancer, but I don't want to do chemo, or I do want to do chemo. You have the right to refuse medical or surgical treatment. If the doctor came in and said, Mr. Smith, your leg has to be amputated or you're going to die, you have the right to say, I don't want my leg amputated. You have the right to prepare advanced directives at any time. There's no age limit. And you have the right to review this information on instructional policies governing these rights. So this information has to be made available to you. So in the Karen Ann Quinlan case, so in April of 1975, there was a 21-year-old woman. She stopped breathing and she went into a coma. 5 months later, she was diagnosed as being in a persistent vegetative state. Parents requested to disconnect the ventilator, and the doctors refused to disconnect this machine, and they went to court. And this went through years and years and years of this patient remaining in this condition. 10 years later, in June of 1985, the patient was weaned from a respirator, and she survived nearly 10 more years. She died of pulmonary failure in a nursing home. Another legal case, Nancy Cruzan. So Congress passed the Patient Self-Determination Act that we just talked about in 1990 in a response to this patient's case. In January of 1983, at 25 years old, she was in a car accident. She was thrown out of the car. The paramedics on scene were able to resuscitate her, and a feeding tube was inserted 3 weeks later when the patient was in a coma. 5 years later, in October of 1987, her parents requested that they be allowed to remove the feeding tube from Nancy. 6 years later, in July, Cruzan's parents were authorized to request the withholding of food and water. November, same year, 1988, Missouri State Supreme Court overturned the decision, and they appealed this decision. 8 years later, in 1990, the court ruling allowed Cruzan's parents to remove the feeding tube. Cruzan died 11 days later, 8 years after being in her car accident. The very famous case of Terry Schiavo. In 1990, this 26-year-old female patient, she collapsed at home. She was rushed to the hospital. 4 months later, Terry's husband was appointed as her guardian. 8 years later, in 1998, Michael Schiavo filed a petition to withdraw life support, and Terry's parents opposed this happening, and the court appointed a new guardian, or an ad litem, a third-party custody, because of the dispute between the family and the parents and the patient's husband. 10 to 15 years later, so from 2000 to 2005, given lack of a living will, a trial was to be held to determine what her wishes would have been. Now, think about this. This lady was only 21 years old. Most patients in their 20s, most people in their 20s are not thinking about, okay, if I were to be in a car accident and be in a coma, would I want these things done? That's not something that's typically on, a younger person's mind. In 2001, Terry's parents filed a motion filing evidence that Terry's wishes and claiming new medical treatment was now available for her. 2003, the feeding tube was removed for a second time. A week later in Florida, the legislature passed Terry's law ordering tube feedings to be reinserted. 2004, the Florida Supreme Court overturned that law as unconstitutional. 2005, Terry's feeding tube was removed for the third and final time. And on March 31st, 2005, Terry passed away. So, as a recap from these cases, and when we're talking about these historical cases and how these patients ended up passing away, and what some would call, years after when they maybe should have passed, or what they should have had done to them and not have had done to them, it really brings to light, some questions for yourself, regardless of age, regardless of your current health status. Does anyone know what you would want right now? So if you got up from this class and you got in your car and you were driving to go grab some lunch, and you were in a tragic car accident and you couldn't make decisions for yourself, who would be that person? Who knows what you would and wouldn't want? Who knows if you would want to be like Terry and have a tube placed in your belly for feedings and to be artificially fed, even though you can't wake up, you can't make those decisions for yourself, you can't tell them, no, stop, don't do that. Who's that person for you? It carries us into the next little category, and it talks about breaking down what each of these advanced directives are. And so the broad term used, advanced directives, are legal documents that allow patients to formally state their choices. What do you want? What don't you want in regards to your health? So these are things that are implemented once you lack the ability to make informed medical decisions for yourself. In 2017, there was a study of almost 800,000 Americans. Only 29% of those people had completed a living will that contained specific information to what they want at end of life. 33% of people had a designated healthcare power of attorney. That's it. So 70% of the population had none of these things, didn't have a plan, didn't have a person, didn't have something in writing that says, these are the things I do and do not want. So do advanced directives work? When we break down, if you guys can see this, this little chart, when we talk about do they work, if you have them and you have them in place, they work. If you have them with the people that need to have them, they work. When we talk about a DNR, right, we have the conversation of, okay, well, I have a DNR, it's on the yellow Florida State piece of paper, and I keep it in a really safe place. It's at my bank in my security box. That does nothing. If I'm your ER nurse and you come into the emergency room and your husband tells me that you signed a DNR and you don't want any of those things done, and that DNR is not with you or on file at the hospital or on file with your primary care doctor, it's truly in the safety deposit box at the bank, it doesn't mean anything. So when we talk about do advanced directives work, they work, but we have to know where it's important to have them, who needs to have them, who needs to have copies of them, and we'll talk about the importance of that.
Yeah, I think, Brittany, if I could just make a comment, I think that's one of the confusing things for a lot of people that have DNRs. You know, I don't think they're fully aware that having a DNR and having it available are two different things. Yes.
So this is a really, really hot topic, and regardless of the care setting we're in. So, for example, my husband is a firefighter here in the county, and he runs 911 calls all the time. And if he comes to your home because you were you passed out, and your wife called 911 for you, and he shows up, and you are in a critical emergency. Maybe your heart is in a lethal rhythm. Maybe you're passed out on the floor and you're not breathing, and we are faced with the decision of acting right now, a life-saving measure. Unless that DNR is with you and readily available, we would have to do everything. So when we talk about being at home and having a DNR, most people keep them on their refrigerator, right? Because in a emergency situation, you don't want to have to run to your safe or your filing cabinet at home to find that document. It needs to be somewhere readily available where you can just grab it and present it and know right then and there what's going on. So as a hospice nurse, and you know, most of our patients do have do not resuscitate orders. We either, if the patient is in a bed or a specific room of the house most of the time, we literally tape it to the wall above their bed or to their headboard. Or we tell the families, keep this on the refrigerator. Do not move this. Don't put this away. Don't hide it anywhere. Keep it somewhere where it's readily available. Most Florida State DNRs have a section at the bottom of them that your doctor can sign, and it's actually a smaller version of your DNR, and it goes in your wallet, where you can keep that little piece in your wallet. So if you were in a car accident, You know, the paramedics are going to look for your wallet to find your ID. That would be there with it. Or some patients keep it like in their pill bags when they're traveling, things like that. So you have some different ideas of kind of how to utilize that, but the bottom line is, if it's not with you, it doesn't exist to me. Like, if you are in an emergency situation and that cannot be presented at the time of the emergency, my job, the firefighter's job, the paramedic's job, is to immediately start trying to save your life with whatever measures that means, whether that means putting you on a breathing tube or doing CPR for you, whatever life-saving emergency you're facing, we would be obligated to do that at the time. Does that give a little clearer of a picture, Jerry?
Yes, it does. I think that's, as I said, I think that's one of the most, I guess, unknown things that people have in their mind. They have a DNR, but again, unless it's available, you know, like you just stated, it really doesn't help in an emergency situation.
Another, just something to think about is, if you are a snowbird or a snowflake, you travel a little bit here and there, or you live state to state throughout the year, you need to have a do not resuscitate order that would encompass the state that you're currently in. So the state of Florida has a state of Florida DNR, it says it at the top, and it's on a specific color of paper, it's canary yellow. So if you are living in Ohio part of the year, you would need to have your Ohio state DNR with you there. If you are in Florida, you need to have your Florida state DNR. So that's also something to just make sure you speak with your healthcare provider about, and you have that in place if you do travel state to state throughout the year and live in different places. So, sorry, I got off on a tangent. So this next piece gives us a little bit more information. It says approximately 85% of adults believe that completing an advanced directive is the right thing to do. So our last slide, we saw only 29% of people actually did it. So we all know it's the right thing to do. It's just executing and getting it done. 38% of patients with chronic illnesses have completed an advanced directive versus 33% of healthy adults. So what that tells me is, A, not enough people have done it. B, that sick people versus healthy people, there's not really a big difference in the amount of people that are establishing these advanced directives. So again, sums it up. We think it's important, but we don't do it.
Sort of like dieting, I would suggest.
Yeah, that's perfect, Jerry. Yes. We know we shouldn't eat that cheeseburger, but it's just so good, so we eat it.
Yeah.
So
another general question, Brittany,
yeah.
if I can throw it in. I think probably way more people have financial wills, estate wills, than have DNRs.
Yes.
Is it normal practice, do you think, for an estate lawyer that's writing a will for you to suggest the DNRs? Do you know if they normally do that?
So what I can say from my past experiences is typically when you're dealing with estates and financial advisors for wills and things of that nature, they're not medical. Right. So you get all of those things set up for your finances and your estates and, you know, what you want to happen with all of your stuff, but it's just as important. If you're thinking about that, then you need to be thinking about, okay, well, before anybody decides what they're going to do with all my stuff, they have to know what they're going to do with me. So if you've already done those things, then you've missed another really important step. And that first step should be having that conversation with your doctor about the DNR. And, you know, if you're having that conversation and saying, hey, I'm meeting with my attorney next week to go set up my living will and get all my things in line, you need to be having the same conversation with your doctor about, I want to get my ducks in a row. I want to be educated. I want to make the right decisions. How can you help guide me through that?
Yeah, I think it has to be viewed as part of the overall process.
Absolutely. Yes. If you're thinking about what they're going to do with your stuff after you're gone, you should think about what they're going to do before you're gone and how are they going to treat you and what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When we talk about education for end-of-life topics, they did, 2 little surveys here, and it says, figure 1, the first paragraph says, in your opinion, how important is it that a healthcare provider have advanced directive conversations with patients? Only 51% said extremely important, a little less said very important, and 10% said somewhat important. So that to me says we need more education, not only for patients, but for providers too. Empowering the providers, your doctors, to have this conversation with you, regardless of how uncomfortable it may be or how time-consuming it can be. It's a extremely important conversation. Figure 2 says the percentage of respondents who support new Medicare benefit paying for advanced care planning conversations. And this is going into trying to get a benefit to pay for you being able to go and get all of these things put into place. Different types of advanced directives. So these are going to vary on the state that you live in and what the legal requirements are for your state. I would consider myself an expert in the state of Florida, but it's the only place I've ever lived or practiced as a healthcare professional here. So you can always get online and look up your different states if you guys are viewing this from anywhere outside of Florida. Your most common types of advanced directives are living wills and durable power of attorney. We'll break down a living will. So a living will is kind of a guide for your healthcare team on what happens if you're unable to express your wishes. So this must also have an advanced illness or be permanently unconscious. So it describes the type of medical treatment that the person would or wouldn't want. It identifies a legal representative. They will use the term surrogate or proxy, and provides a general guide about what you would or wouldn't want. So for example, you can go online and you can print out a generic living will. And it's going to have things like, if I am deemed terminal, do I want artificial hydration? Yes or no? If I'm deemed terminal and can't make this decision, do I want artificial nutrition? Yes or no? Would I want to be supported on machines like a ventilator, which would help support your respiratory status? There's a lot of, yes, I want this, no, I don't want this, and it breaks it down into different categories. These can range in very general to very specific wishes. This is a legal document and is not a medical order, so a doctor doesn't have to give you this. A doctor doesn't have to sign this. This is a legal document. A competent person may revoke a living will at any time. Okay? What does that mean? So if you have a living will and you say, I don't want any of these things done, and then 3 months later you're diagnosed with terminal cancer, and the doctor says you can't eat or drink anything by mouth anymore. The only way for you to carry on is to have a feeding tube put in. And previously on your living will, you put that you wouldn't want that. Well, you can revoke that living will and you could have those things done. As it states below, this can be changed or revoked at any time if the patient is able to communicate and is legally competent. Because this is not a medical order, it is not used to treat a person in an emergency situation. So a lot of times, as an ER nurse, I would have patients come in and they would have had a massive stroke. And I would turn to the spouse and I would say, Mrs. Smith, does your husband have a living will or a DNR or any of these things on file that are going to guide us in what his care is going to look like. And living wills and other advanced directives like a DNR are not the same thing. They are used so much interchangeably, and they're not interchangeable. So a wife would say to me, well, my husband would never want any of these things done. He has a living will. Stop doing CPR. No, don't put him on that machine. But in an emergency situation, again, goes back to my DNR piece, in an emergency situation, if you stop breathing right now and you don't have that DNR in front of me, I have to perform life-saving measures, okay? So just to clarify that one more time, a living will does not replace something like a DNR, do not resuscitate order, in an emergency situation. So that's why I want to make sure that last line there is really important. A durable power of attorney for healthcare. So this is a legal document that makes the person your proxy. They're able to make healthcare decisions for you if you can't. Usually this is part of an advanced directive, but it could be just a separate form. So a lot of times when you go into a hospital, they have just a plain healthcare decision maker form, which just says, okay, Brittany, if I can't make decisions for myself, I want you, and it usually gives you the opportunity to list two people. If I can't make decisions for myself, I want my husband, Mitchell Berger, and my oldest daughter, Mabry, to be able to make decisions for me. Some of these forms can be written very specifically, and it'll say and or it'll say first this person, and if that person is unable to, then this person. So be careful with the wording on any of these documents that you're reviewing. You want to make sure that it clearly depicts what you would want. So we talk about this a lot in second marriages or blended families where maybe it's a second marriage and this lady has 4 adult children. Well, she wants her children to make the decisions for her, not her new husband. So in the state of Florida, if we didn't have that form that says who she wants, that she wants her children to, the state of Florida says that husband is first in line for decision making. So if you are part of a blended family, or if you have a spouse that maybe wouldn't be the first person you would want making your decisions, again, these forms are that much more important for you guys to look at and advocate for yourself for what that looks like. Maybe, and keeping them up to date. Maybe you have these forms and your spouse has passed away. So redoing this form to say, okay, well, my spouse has passed away, who's next in line? Maybe it's not your children. Maybe it's your sister. Maybe it's not a family member, blood relation at all. Maybe it's your next door neighbor because you've lived by them for 30 years and they've always helped take care of you. If it's not in writing, it can't be supported. So just making sure you read these forms over, depending on the state that you're in, making sure that the person you choose is aware that they're that person, giving them a copy of that form so that they have it, where if you fall and break your hip and you're at the hospital, you can't find that form, it wasn't in your back pocket when you fell, giving a copy to the person you've nominated on that form so they have it too. So they could come to the hospital and say, I am the advocate, the durable power of attorney for Mrs. Smith, and here's my paper that shows that. So again, this just says the proxy can be whomever the patient chooses, and it is advisable to name a backup person, which, like I said, most of those forms have 2 people on the form you can list. So the proxy can speak with caregivers and help make decisions based on what the patient's directions have been. If the patient's wishes are unknown, the proxy will be the one that decides what happens. So you want this to be someone that you know and you love and you trust to make the decisions that they think you would want to have carried out. Again, it's important to talk to them about what your wishes would and wouldn't be. If the agent does not know that the patient's wishes, the agent must make the decision according to what they feel is of the patient's best interest. Proxies cannot be a physician or a nurse providing professional care. So as a hospice nurse, I can't be a healthcare proxy for a patient that I'm caring for. Regardless of how close we are or how long I've been caring for you, how much you love me and I'm like the granddaughter you never had, I can't be your proxy. So professionals that are providing care to you cannot be that person. So the physician medical orders for life-sustaining treatment, and I've never heard anybody actually use out all those letters. So this summarizes what the patient's wishes are in the form of medical orders that specify direct medical treatments that a patient wants in an emergency. These are not advanced directives because they contain actionable medical orders that are effective immediately based on the current medical condition. So these are more of like in the acute care setting, so hospitals, emergency rooms, and things like that. These would be used with a living will to guide what the patient would want if they're not able to make their own decisions. These forms are intended for individuals with serious illnesses or are very near to end of life. They do not name a specific person. So again, these are going to be more of the forms that are used in an acute or critical care setting like a hospital. A couple important things to consider. So choosing not to have a certain life-sustaining or aggressive medical treatment is different than refusing medical care, right? You could say, I want to have chemotherapy, but I still want to be a DNR. So if this chemo gets to the point where I'm dying, I don't want you to try to save me. Does that make sense? Is that you can still get treatment, but not want certain treatment. A patient may revoke a living will at any time. Back to that first thing, I want to just clarify something. Someone may say, well, my dad has a DNR. Okay, so dad has a DNR. A DNR only says if my heart stops beating or if I stop breathing, I'm clinically, but right, I would be passing away at that point. I don't want you to do CPR in my chest, and I don't want you to put me on a breathing machine. That doesn't mean that you can't get care. If you have a stroke and they can give you medicine to reverse the stroke or improve the outcome, you can still have that done. Signing a DNR does not keep you from having treatment for things that are treatable. So it isn't a death sentence. People will be like, well, I don't want to sign that DNR because if I sign a DNR, you're not going to do anything to help me. No, it doesn't mean that at all. You can still have treatment even if you have a DNR. A DNR simply says, in the simplest terms, if I'm passing away, if my heart has stopped and I have stopped breathing and my body is trying to pass away, I don't want you to try to revive me, just to clarify. No general agreement exists for recognizing living wills from other states. So as I stated before, make sure if you travel from state to state throughout the year and you live in different places, you want to make sure that you have that state's recognized advanced directives and do not resuscitate orders. A living will is much more limited than a healthcare power of attorney. Again, Like I said, that living will is very general, and it is going to have very general statements, and they're usually checked yes or no type boxes.
One moment.
So advance directives become legally valid as soon as they were signed in front of the required witness. So if you're in the hospital and you're getting ready to go in for surgery, and your nurse is advocating for you, and she comes to you and she says, Mr. Smith, you're getting ready to go in for major surgery. If something goes wrong or you don't wake up all the way with all of your wits, I want to make sure that we're asking the right person what to do. So do you want to fill out a healthcare surrogate form? And you say, absolutely. And so you list the person that you want. So I want my wife, Mrs. Smith, to make this decision, and you sign the bottom of it, and I'm your nurse, and I witness that you just completed this form. It's immediately valid. You roll into surgery, something happens, you can't make a decision for yourself. I have a legal form that is valid right now that I'm able to enact upon it and go to that person and ask what we're going to do next. They do not go into effect unless the patient is unable to make his or her own decisions. So if my dad named me as his healthcare surrogate, but he is still able to make his own decisions, I don't get a say. Even if I don't agree with him, I don't get to say. If he is alert and oriented and can make his own decisions, my opinion does not matter, even though I'm on that piece of paper, because he's still able to make his own decisions. Use approved state-specific documents, like I keep saying. Make sure you have a Florida State DNR, an Ohio State DNR. Changes to advance directives should be recorded and given to appropriate healthcare clinicians and proxies. Like I said, if you have forms that you filled out 10 years ago, routinely make it a habit to once a year, check those forms, make sure those are all still people that are in your life, and the right people are still on those forms. If someone has unfortunately passed away or something of that sort, make sure that you're updating those forms. So again, your family is going to have the right direction on who to call. Reevaluate yearly, and if needed, record any changes. So make sure if you make those changes, you take a new copy to your primary care doctor so that they have that on file, the most up-to-date one on file as well. So a do not resuscitate order. Resuscitation is an attempt by a medical professional to restart the patient's heart and breathing, like we've talked about. This may include chest compressions, where you see it in the movies. Some of you may have gone through a CPR class or a basic life support class. Sometimes we have to shock the heart and try to get it back into a good rhythm. And breathing machines, which is where we take that big hard plastic tube and intubate you, that goes into your lungs, and we hook you up to a machine that helps breathe for you. A do not resuscitate order means that if the patient's breathing stops or if their heart stops beating, a natural death will be allowed to happen. This means the body is going to do its own thing. I'm not going to try to do chest compressions. I'm not going to shock you. I'm not going to breathe for you. I'm going to let this natural process happen. This applies in hospitals and acute care settings. Some states and hospitals require a new DNR each time the patient is admitted. That is not the case in the state of Florida. You don't have to have a new DNR signed every time you come to the hospital. But again, if you've been to the hospital and they have that DNR on file, if you have to go back to the hospital, they should be coming to you and saying, Mr. Smith, we have a do not resuscitate order on file from when you were here last year. Are these still your current wishes? So again, keeping those up to date. And if you say, nope, I changed my mind, I don't want to have that DNR anymore, I want everything done, then they need to know that information. An out-of-hospital DNR is used when a person doesn't want to be resuscitated if they are outside of the hospital. So in the state of Florida, that's that big yellow canary piece of paper that says Florida State do not resuscitate. And this is what a emergency response team would be looking for. So if that's, you know, you've called 911, an ambulance crew, fire department crew, the police department, anybody would be looking for that form. Without a physician's signed DNR order, the emergency crew must perform CPR. So that's like I said, if I don't have that form and I show up at your house, or my husband, the firefighter, shows up at your house and you're unresponsive on the floor, if I don't see that form, I have to do everything. I have to do CPR. I have to start breathing for you. All of those things have to be done. So this should stay with the patient. It should be in the home, the room, on the refrigerator, have the little card, the wallet card with you, so that, God forbid, something happens when you're out jogging or out walking the dog and something like that happens, you have that with you. There are state-specific rules for every state on Do Not Resuscitate forms, so I encourage you to educate yourself on your state-specific orders. So completing advanced directives, a couple of different things. VITAS advocates for something called 5 Wishes. It's a book that has very basic verbiage on what advanced directives are, and included in that book has a state legal healthcare proxy form in it that you can fill out. And you could take it to your doctor's office, the hospital, and they would scan it in as a legal document. It is there's advanced directives, and it's included for 42 different states throughout the country and in the District of Columbia. The 5 wishes in this book include, 1, the person I want to make my decisions for me when I can't. So my healthcare surrogate, who's that person going to be? Wish number 2, the kind of medical treatment I do or do not want. So, you know, it talks about, do I want to be in a hospital? Do I want to have IV hydration to keep me alive? Number 3, how comfortable do I want to be? Do I want the doctors to give me pain medicine so that I'm not in pain? Do I want someone to massage my feet because rubbing my feet helps make me feel better? Wish number 4, how I want people to treat me, right? This is always a really uncomfortable thing for a lot of people. Do you want people sitting around you and talking to you and loving on you, or do you want people to leave you alone? You know, some people don't want an audience at end of life. So it kind of gives you the ability to put that information there. And what I want my loved ones to know. So there's a really nice section there about, you know, you can write things into certain people or just basic things. I want my loved ones to know that I was in the military for, 14 years. I want my loved ones to know that the most amazing family vacation I ever went on was our family reunion in 1999. Just some really nice places to write some things in like that. What to do with your advanced directives? So again, you want to provide a copy of your advanced directives to your proxy, the person you're putting on those forms, the backup person. You want your primary care doctor to have it. If you have an attorney, maybe you're really, really close with your next door neighbors and you want them to have a copy, the people you trust the most. Keep the original safe but easily accessible. Like we talked about, don't go throwing your do not resuscitate in a safety deposit box at the bank. And then it's recommended that you keep a card in your purse that says you have these things. Excuse me. So this kind of goes into advanced directives and how it relates to hospice. Do you want me to educate on this, Jerry, or?
Yeah, I think so. Again,
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So when we talk about advanced directives and how they are, how we use them to educate patients that we're caring for, first and foremost, they're not required to have an advanced directive. you don't have to have a do not resuscitate order to receive hospice care. Hospice staff will discuss the importance of having advanced directives and making sure, again, the focus of all of this is making sure that you as the patient have a voice. We're preserving what you want and giving you that voice even when you're not able to voice that for yourself anymore. Hospice offers training on advanced directives, part of what we're doing right now. Different ways of starting the conversation, taking the initiative, owning the responsibility for yourself to know what this looks like for you. Taking a closer look at what is dying, having the maturity to know that none of us are getting out of this world alive, and it's something that all of us are going to face at some point in our lives. Maybe you've been through the death of a loved one, and you want more, being able to take a closer look at and saying, well, you know, my mom had hospice 30 years ago, and they started her on hospice, and she died 2 weeks later. And it's hospice's fault because they gave her morphine. You know, being able to really educate yourself and know what those things are going to look like for you and your family. When we talk about from the provider side, we want to listen more than we talk. We want you to be able to give us the information. We want you to tell us everything this means to you, give you the opportunity to ask questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. There's no such thing as well, I don't know if anybody else asked this. If you're thinking it, someone else is probably thinking it too. Find out what's most important to you as a patient, learning what your values and goals are for your end-of-life plans, being able to relate these experiences. Again, you know, a lot of times when we are, depends on who you're talking to, talking about how your faith is going to influence what your end-of-life decisions are going to be. Talking with patients and families who don't know all the answers. We don't have all the answers. Me as a nurse, I deal with end of life every single day, and I still don't have all the answers. And, you know, when we're having these conversations with our healthcare provider, or when you're talking to your spouse about this, or when you're talking to your children about this, allow there to be time for silence and time to think and reflect on what is being what's being talked about, right? These are big decisions, and I think sometimes just being quiet and letting the silence be there gives us that opportunity to reflect on things and really think our questions and our answers through. When we talk about, this is a reoccurring conversation. This isn't something, when I talk about palliative care or hospice care, I meet a new patient for the first time, and I read in the notes that the patient doesn't want a DNR right now. Okay, so patient doesn't have to have a DNR right now, but I'm going to keep having the conversation. Even if it's just a little bit at a time, I want to give you the opportunity to ask questions, to think about things from appointment to appointment. Maybe you're not ready to have the nitty-gritty conversation and decide on a do not resuscitate today. But when you go see your doctor, you say, hey doc, you know, I listened to this video about advanced care planning, and there was a lot of conversation about DNRs and living wills. Can you provide me some information with that so that I can start looking it over, right? That's step number one. Doesn't mean you walk in and the doctor says, oh, you want to talk about DNRs? Okay, you got to decide today if you want to sign this DNR. So having the patience with yourself to start the conversation. Don't feel like you've got to make all these decisions all at one time. Again, the entire purpose of this is so that when something happens, you're already prepared. You don't want to be making these decisions in the state of emergency or a state of crisis. You want to have a plan in place. Jerry, this is what we call the spikes method, and this is a little bit of how we have the conversation with patients who want to start exploring these conversations. And, you know, I'll make this relevant for you all at home. You know, you don't want to take your kids out to dinner at a sports bar on a Sunday when the Dallas Cowboys are playing and start talking about advanced directives, right? There's a time and a place for everything. So the setting is really important, and maybe just inviting the kids over for dinner and saying, you know, we've got some things we want to talk to you guys about, and having a good setting to facilitate this conversation. Kind of getting a feel for what the perception is. You know, don't scare your kids and be like, Mom and Dad, we need to talk to you about something really important. No, I'm not coming here to tell you that I've got brain cancer. I'm coming to just let you know I think this is important and we want to talk about this. So giving that invitation to be able to ask permission to have that conversation. Having knowledge is having power. So educate yourself on all of these things that we've talked about today and the state-specific things, and kind of have the knowledge of what you want to convey to them. Expect for it to be an emotional conversation. You know, I was 18 when my mom passed away of cancer. She was very young, very, very young, and it was, of course, it was emotional. I didn't have the knowledge, and I knew nothing. I was an 18-year-old little kid, and so, you know, depending on where you're at in your life, depending on everything else that's going on in life, you know, know this is going to be an emotional conversation, and being able to, you know, openly have that emotion there. And then summarizing the conversation. So, okay, kids, you know, I know this was a really difficult conversation, and I know it's scary to think about, but I feel so much better leaving your house tonight, knowing that if something happened to me in my sleep tonight, we've had this conversation, and you guys know what Mom and Dad want now. And it's, you know, I think at the end of that, we can all embrace that and walk away feeling a lot better about the entire subject. Something to consider, it's difficult to have an end-of-life conversation through an ET tube, okay? So for those of you that don't know what an ET tube is, that's that big, it's an endotracheal tube, and it's the big hard plastic tube that we put in your mouth that goes down into your lungs that we breathe for you through. And it's funny because you can't talk around it at all. And so, you know, this is just saying that it's really hard for you to tell your family what you want when you are on a life support machine, when you're on a breathing machine. So you want to have those conversations before you get in those situations. So the closing thought for everything we've talked about today is a quote that says, "I have an advanced directive, not because I have a serious illness, but because I have a family." And to me, that speaks tremendous volume. And it really, you know, it really says, I'm not saying doing an advanced directive doesn't mean that I'm dying tomorrow or next year or 10 years from now, but I'm prepared because I have a family and I want them to know what I want, what I don't want, and how important it is for each of us to have that plan in place prior to a big, scary diagnosis or prior to a life-changing event happening. So advocating for yourself and making sure that you have your advanced directives in place.